Are you thinking of being an investment policy reviewer? It's a great way to help others and also learn from a wide variety of investment policies. Are you considering your own agency's investment policy, wondering what improvements you might contribute, and then have your ideas peer reviewed? Or maybe you're an elected official interested in how to review your agency's policy before you approve it. If your job has anything to do with the safety and investment of taxpayer money in the state of Washington, then this video is for you. We in this profession are public servants. Seeking the good of others is what we do and what we're about. The investment policy of each agency becomes a foundational guide for stewarding taxpayer money well. Now, it's not imperative that you display your policy's certification this way. However, it's good for 5 years, and this certificate sure would look good on your investment policy, wouldn't it? Excluding the cover page, table of contents, glossary, and any other addenda, most policies have about 8 pages at their core. To be thorough, we really need to read every word. But the good news, though, once you've read 1 or 2 policies, it does become very familiar territory. And let's face it, a fair portion of it comes straight out of state statutes. Who are investment policies for? Let's keep our audience and our purpose in mind. Our audience is our taxpayers and the elected officials who represent them. We want our policies to be self-explanatory or at least educational to the point that they're understandable everyday non-financial people. We want to cultivate a reputation of trust, credibility, and reliability. An ability to communicate and teach can be important when you're at the podium in a public meeting explaining what you plan to do with millions of taxpayer dollars. So let's zoom out. Let me show you the big picture. This is the model investment policy in Washington. It's got 8 pages of language. We all need to adapt to our own policy. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes and we'll review each section. Investing this many minutes to review your own policy should yield a policy for your agency that'll serve for years. Becoming an investment policy reviewer is an investment in excellence that reaps benefits in counties, cities, and special districts statewide for years to come. You may want to grab a copy of the model policy and compare it to yours. So where do we start? Throughout this video, we're going to use either model policy language or samples from real-life public agencies. I thought I'd put the score sheet on the left side of the screen and an investment policy on the right, but this is a little hard to read. But that's what you'll probably do at your desk with 2 monitors in front of you. Let's grab the investment policy score sheet. Let's get started. The entity name should already be typed into the first box. You should just have to add your reviewer number and today's date. Where do you get your reviewer number? The Investment Policy Review Committee Chair assigns those. We want you to be able to offer constructive criticism and still keep your friendships, so anonymity is important. Your comments and suggestions will be combined with the other reviewers, and if 2 reviewers both pass or both fail a policy, there's no need for a 3rd reviewer. The agency submitting their policy will have typed in the page numbers already. Your job is going to be just checking off boxes. So let's get started. First item on the checklist asks, does the policy have a table of contents? That's easy to confirm, they do. And you can check the first box. Next question is whether it looks like all the policy elements are listed on the table. The WPTA sample policy lists 22 elements and this one has 30. So it's probable. Let's check off the box. And if we find any missing as we go, we can say something in the comments at the end. Do the page numbers agree? Spot check 1 or 2. Page numbering generally goes off track at the back of the policy when things get added. We can check off the box and let's move forward. The next question asks if there's a coherent statement of purpose. Give it a quick read, see if it makes sense. We're looking for policy level language. We can check off the box, but as you go through the policy, also keep your eye out for any type of language that you as an experienced reviewer might find to make a comment on. It's always fine to give full marks on meeting certification requirements, but we're trying to be helpful. You can always make a comment using the words, you might consider this or that. In this case, the statement makes sense and it's specific to the city. Next question. The scope section asks a few questions. All we have to do is check boxes. Does the policy encompass all funds? Does it cite the applicable RCWs? Does it contemplate addition of new funds? We're just looking for language that provides guidance. If that's in place, then should a new fund be created, the policy doesn't need to be updated just for that. Now, does it exclude any funds? This is an item that just simply may not apply, so if there's no language, let's assume it doesn't. We can check that box for non-applicable. If it did say something, we'd look at the language, just make sure it makes sense, and then give them extra credit and another box checked. I think the score sheet, when used as a tool for applicants, serves to have submitters consider the question. It's not likely that we'll know if they missed this. Now for counties. When counties serve other agencies as an investment pool, there should be language like this. And we can move that checkbox over to the other column. For counties, we'd like to see a policy level statement that there needs to be written pool participation agreements and that there's an approval process. This is a new section for our certification. I don't think it's going to be a fatal flaw if it's missing, but it's an area we're looking to develop better. Delegation of authority is the enabling legislation cited by RCW reference. It sure is, and is the presence or absence of local code described? Counties will be a little bit different. The local code is right here, and the governing body that approves or adopts the policy is named. You can check off a bunch of boxes. And is the treasurer or investment officer specifically authorized? Here's that. And is the agency's chief executive included? In the case of the county or the city, it is. And then our roles sufficiently identified in the policy for purpose of disclosures and reporting. This entity has an investment committee that's mentioned. And then lastly, under this section, is there provision to contract out portfolio management? If so, it would look like this, and we can certainly check that off. Now, this is foundational for every investment policy. This is fundamental. Safety, liquidity, and yield in that order should be mentioned very clearly. And in this one, they've done that. We can check it off. In the liquidity section, there's an important thing that should be mentioned, and that's the reason that liquidity is important is because we want to avoid having to sell a security prematurely at less than market value or what we paid for it. That is here. We can check off that box. And on yield, does it use meaningful language such as optimizing or maximizing? This policy mentions attaining as high a rate of return as prudently possible, having first satisfied safety and liquidity. That's terrific. What we want to avoid is something generic and meaningless like hoping to attain a market rate of return. Which is kind of meaningless. What does that mean? It just means we get what we get. We do want to have some aspirational language here. Is the Prudent Investor standard explained? Here we've got it mentioned two different ways. Both of them do mention RCWs, but if you look up these, one of them pertains to the state treasurer, so we would want to mention that in the comments section. But also very importantly, is staff relieved of responsibility if the actions that they took were in accordance with the investment policy? That should absolve them of personal liability. That's important. In the ethics section, is staff instructed to prioritize serving the interests of the agency, avoid conflicts of interest? And where they do occur, we want to require that they're disclosed. Now, we don't want to require that employees, to use an extreme, preclude them from owning property in within the jurisdiction, or owning small amounts of shares of a bank that we happen to be using for the agency, or that we buy debt issues from. When it comes to authorizing the brokers that we work with, is the process for selecting them described? Here we've got it. A BDQ is very common. Brokers expect it, and it can be a separate document. A lot of agencies include them as an addendum right in the policy, so it's all in one document. The currently acceptable elements should be described, although they'll certainly be spelled out in the BDQ. It's important to maintain a list of broker-dealers. That can also be an addendum to the policy. If you review it annually, it's not too hard to keep that updated. And speaking of an annual review, it should be required to review that the brokers that we're using are current with their licensing. This is kind of the heart of the investment policy. Most people really want to make sure that we're clear on what investments we're authorizing. So the first question is, does each investment cite the enacting statute from the state? This one does. We can check off that box. And does this policy indicate the primary instruments we're expecting to use? This one does. We can check off the box. Some investment policies want to retain investments that are authorized in state statutes that the entity doesn't currently include. They may be worried that the next treasurer might want to use them. So one thing you could do is this has a section A, you could create a section B. Go ahead and include those and just state that it isn't expected to be using these routinely. Is the list of authorized investments current? One thing is brokers' acceptances currently are no longer traded. So we're looking these days to make sure that those are no longer listed. Does the policy refrain from simply copying the model policy? That should be obvious, and we should be able to check the box. If not, we would want to make a comment later in the comment section. Does the policy refrain from allowing later additions that would circumvent the governing body? Here's what that looks like. If we list the investment instruments that are authorized and we're asking our governing body to approve it, and we include a sentence that says, and other investments authorized by law, what we've done is we've just allowed the state legislature to go authorize something that the governing body may not have agreed that would be appropriate for this entity. Lastly, if repurchase agreements are authorized, it should clearly require a master repurchase agreement. That would look like this. And then the question, does the policy refrain from authorizing investments it doesn't actually hold? From a reviewer standpoint, you'll have a sense of whether the entity you're reviewing is a small one with very limited staff or a large one with existing practices. So the authorized investments should be appropriate to the entity. It's important to not just say any investment not expressly permitted in this policy is ineligible. It's helpful to list stocks and cryptocurrency. It has been common in recent years to have elected officials ask, why don't we invest in stock? Well, the reason, and you'll need to explain it when you have the policy adopted, is that we don't invest in anything that principal can be lost. Stocks can lose value. Same thing is true of cryptocurrency. The thing about cryptocurrency currently is it's essentially a foreign currency with no backing sovereign entity. And then in this case, here we have repurchase and reverse repos being expressly prohibited by an entity. It is authorized by state, but the entity here is saying that it's inappropriate. They'll never have staff that would use those. Our, under diversification, our portfolio limits specified by dollar and or percentage. It's most common to have percentages. That's very common. And then for corporates or commercial paper, do we have per issuer limits specified? They're actually in both instances here. The table format is really helpful to be able to find. And we never want to get an audit finding because at the time of purchase, we were within our policy limits, but because the portfolio had maturities or just was, or we reduced our position in the state pool, we don't want to ever have an audit finding later. And to be thorough in the diversification category, we want to be considering not just by issuer or sector, but we want to be considering the idea that we're not subjecting our portfolio to reinvestment risk by staggering our maturities. Under maximum maturities, it's pretty typical to have 5-year limits. Some entities may have others, but we want them to be stated. And then for the calculation of average maturity, it's a good idea in the policy to make sure that we mention our state pool and our cash and depository accounts, both which essentially have a 1-day maturity. And then we want to be clear that for the purposes of calculating our average maturity, that we're going to take the assumption that callable securities won't be called. If you're using safekeeping, then delivery versus payment is pretty routine, but we want to put that as an assurance to our citizens and our governing body that that's what we're going to be doing. And do we have a policy statement that we're going to be requiring monthly safekeeping reports? Easy to get. We just want to make sure it's in the policy statement. This one has it, so we can check off the boxes. Collateralization. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're not omitting is our depository accounts. So by mentioning the Public Deposit Protection Commission and its handling of the collateralization of our banking over and above FDIC limits, that's just an important item to not miss. We've got it here. We can check off the box. They've listed the RCW. We can check off that box. If an entity listed repurchase agreements in their authorized investments, then we're going to want to make sure that they have this language in their collateralization. It could be non-applicable, but in this case, they authorized it and they've got the language that we're looking for. Under performance standards, we're looking for a benchmark. Here's 3 different examples. The model policy may say that an entity should choose a benchmark. In your actual policy, we want one to be named. Let's not neglect in our policy to contemplate the possibility that securities could be downgraded. Now, we don't want to force an automatic sale of the security because it could just be a simple downgrade, and on evaluation, holding to maturity, your entity is going to get full value at maturity. This is discretionary. We want it mentioned. We want you to have a process, and there should be some disclosure to their governing body and some opportunity for direction. We can check both boxes. The language here fits the bill. Did you know that RCWs in the state of Washington require a monthly report? We see a lot of investment policies that require quarterly reporting, and that is not going to fulfill the requirements of the RCWs. So we've put this onto our checklist, and we want to see language like this. Uh, in the policy, do list the basic elements of reporting. They're pretty common, pretty standard, but we want to have them listed as a policy requirement. And then, of course, you'll get all this off of the safekeeping reports. For investment strategy, we've got a little asterisk. This is not required for certification. Some states do have this in their state statutes. Washington doesn't. However, as a best practice, we want to recognize it. Are there policy level expectations for passive and active trading? And we want to see the language if that would check off the box if we're going to give the policy the extra credit. Um, and again, here we've got policy level guidance on the expectations of selling a position again. This is one a lot of policies miss. Is there a staff position specified as responsible for internal controls? We don't just leave it to auditors. We want to take responsibility for our internal controls. Here's the RCW that we want to make sure that is mentioned, and we want to be refraining from language. We want to have language that doesn't just point to external auditors as being the controls. We want to have something spelled out on what we're expecting our staff to do. Does the policy require annual review? Now here we've got one policy requires annual review by the finance director. The other one has annual review by a committee. Neither of them state the number of years for readoption by the governing body. So that's a check box that we're not going to check here. We would want to make a statement in the comments. Don't think it would keep us from certifying the policy, but again, we're looking for best practices, and this is an opportunity for someone to improve their policy. When we get to the reviewer comments, this is where we have an actual opportunity to be helpful. Here I've got circled in red some sample comments that are typical, the most common ones that we typically see, but this is where reviewers can actually genuinely be helpful, and this is the kind of input that someone who is submitting their policy for peer review is really looking for. And then when the submitter actually goes to take their policy for improvement to their government, to their governing body, we really do hope that they take the credit for having gone through the process. They're improving their policy. That they don't just sound smarter. They actually have grown and brought some improvements. So here's how to update your investment policy. Go to the WPTA website, download the model policy, and then download the location guide and score sheet. Be your own reviewer. If you can enter all the page numbers, then that means that you've got what the criteria is looking for because you've noted where it can be found. And then go back and see if you can check off all the boxes. And then if you've done that, submit your policy for review. And then for extra credit, I would be remiss if I didn't say attend your annual conference for training, and then also be a reviewer. This is where we actually help others, and reviewers learn too. Join me in thanking those who volunteer to be investment policy reviewers. Without independent, objective volunteers, our certification program would lack credibility. There are 39 counties and 281 municipalities and many more special districts. At the time of this recording, though, there are less than 30 actively certified investment policies. This program has the capacity to serve a lot of agencies, but we also need reviewers. Please speak up, and remember, reviewing others' work is a great way to gain experience. If you're watching this, you're interested in finding best practices and seeing them implemented. It takes people with 3 qualities: knowledge, experience, and a willingness to share to make our profession increasingly excellent. And when we start sharing ideas with each other, together we really are better. I hope this has been helpful both to you and to help you bring improvement to the agency you serve, and to encourage you to step up and help others by being a policy reviewer. The best way to be a more valuable public servant is to decide to seek the good of others. Our success lies in helping others succeed. The WPTA Investment Policy Certification Program relies on volunteers. Your policy certification requires someone else to volunteer, so I hope you'll consider not leaving this job for someone else to do. This video also aims to help you, and I hope this helps you grow and develop your own reputation, because it's your efforts that will contribute to the success of your organization and make it a better place. Thanks for watching.